recording now. I have the audio set up a little bit differently today in order for the examples to be audible on the recording. And so the video is still just going to be of the screen of my stream, but the audio will actually be the system audio in the recording today. So if you talk in the voice channel, you'll be part of the recording. So that's okay if it's okay with you, but we have to make those announcements so students are aware. Um, so anyway, I'm going to get started. So we're going to be looking at sound today. We'll look at a few different things that we can do with sound, and then yeah, we'll talk about the assignment a little bit. So we're going to be looking at these sound notes. Um, and I'm going to open up my P5 editor. And let's just quickly take a look at what we made last week. So we did this keyboard and sound example where downloaded a sound of a dog toy. And we can hear the dog toy when I play the sound, and it's connected to the D key on the keyboard. And then we also connected the keyboard to just some visuals as well. And so today we'll look at adding some sounds, and then we'll also look at tying visuals to those sounds. So we'll kind of review a lot of what we already talked about, but we'll also go over some new stuff with sound. So I'm going to start a new project for this one. And I'm going to call this sound example. So we'll add the sound first this time, and then we'll go over the keyboard. We'll add in the keyboard interactions later. Okay, so the beginning of these notes, let me put the notes in the voice chat so you guys can follow along. In the beginning of the notes, there's a little bit of setup that isn't really necessary since we're using the online editor with P5. If you were editing something on your own computer, like locally, you would need to download the sound library. So we talked a little bit about this last week, but that's why we're just going to kind of skip this beginning part of the notes. If we look at our P5 sketch, we can see on the index.html that our sound library is being loaded in by default, so we don't have to do anything with that. But we do have to add some sounds. And so we went over a couple of these last week. There's a few different places to get sounds for free. Freesound.org is a good one. You can create an account and then you can download sounds, and they have different Creative Commons licenses. Free Music Archive is a good place to download music. And I usually like to browse the genres here. It's a good way to kind of get a sense of to find different music, because most of these artists are not like famous artists. They're publishing their music for free. So if you search for a famous artist, you probably won't find them on here. But if you're looking for a specific type of music, you can search by genre. So that's what we'll start with. I'm going to use a music example to get started, just because it'll be a good way to kind of demonstrate some of the different qualities of the sound that we can change using P5. Um, so this is another good one. I like to look at the genres, as I mentioned, so going to discover, then genres, and then you can choose different types of music based on that. I try some classical music. They have different, they have an interface, so you can listen to previews of the sounds and then go to the page for the sounds themselves. So let's take a listen to this one. It's kind of nice, epic, cinematic. Let's listen to a couple more. Jazz Food Cooking Lounge. It's good. I don't know if that's classical music, but I guess it's on here. It's more epic. This is all by the same artist, so you can see the artists in here. I don't know if this is organized by like most popular or if it's just an alphabetical order, but this artist has a lot of these. Let's see. This one's kind of nice. Let's take a look at this. So if I go to the page for this one, you'll see the license, and then there's usually a license down here as well. This says non-commercial 4.0 international license. So that's a slightly restrictive license. That means if we use this sound in a project, we can't monetize that project. So if I made an album or a game or something like that, I could use the sound, but only if I'm not selling the game on Steam or trying to sell the album in Spotify or something like that. But obviously this is not a commercial application, so I can go ahead and click the download button here. Um, oh, it didn't used to make me do that. That's interesting. So you didn't used to have to have a license to download, but maybe you do now. Let me see if I can download it from this page here. Okay, huh. Let's just create an account real quick. I'm sure this won't take too long. So now can I sign in? Oh, I have to verify. Okay, I'm gonna verify my account in another window real quick. Okay. Okay, let's see. Okay, I'm logged in now. So that's kind of interesting. You never in the past needed to have an account for this website, but it's still free, so that's not a big deal. So let's find our sound again. I'm just going to download that file. And so that file is going to be in my downloads folder, um, which you guys won't be able to see on the stream. It'll be part of the recording, but I'm streaming just the browser for audio playback reasons. Anyway, so I downloaded that sound. Another tool that's really useful is JFXer. This is a website that where you can actually generate sounds, and I use this a lot for creating sounds for video games. It has some different defaults like an explosion, hit, jump, different stuff like that. So that's a good place to download some different sound effects if you want to just create them from scratch. Um, so maybe we'll add a couple sound effects later because we already used free sound in the demo last week. So let's use JFXer a little bit. So I'm going to get a couple different sounds here. Let's get a good explosion. So if I like something, there's a lot of different parameters that I can play with. We don't have time to go over all of them, but there's some of the basic parameters that determine how the sound sounds. So you could play around with those. And then if you like something, you can just click export, and that's going to download a copy of that file. It also saves them in your history, which is kind of nice. If I refresh the page, you'll see all the different sounds that I created, but I can also clear them out of my history. Let's choose another sound. Let's do a laser sound. That's pretty good. Go ahead and export that. So I've got a couple sounds to play with later and some music. So there's a bunch of other websites. There's Open Game Art, there's Wikimedia, but those are just a few to kind of get you started. So we're going to have to add these sounds into the P5 sketch. So I'm going to go over here to the sketch files area, and I'm going to click on this drop down and say upload a file. And then I can drag and drop files right here, but I'll click on here and go to my downloads and just select all of those files and click open, and it's going to download those. You'll see that some of the files have different extensions. Music files tend to have MP3 extension because they're a bit longer, so it's a more efficient format, whereas our sound effects tend to be WAV format, so it's a higher quality sound file, but they're shorter since they're sound effects, so they don't take up quite as much space. I think these are downloaded. I think the progress bar didn't finish. One of these sounds has a very long name, so I'm going to go ahead and rename this. So I'll just click on the drop down and click rename. And I'm just going to call this background music.mp3. And then my other files have spaces in them. This can sometimes cause issues, so I'm just going to take the spaces out. So I have lasershoot.wave and explosion.wave. So I'll put those files into my project. And just like we have to do with images, to load a file, I have to use the preload function. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. So let's get started. I'm going to go to my sketch here and make a little comment and say this is a sound example. And it's the 1st of May. And so the first thing I need is some variables to hold the data from my sounds. I'm just going to start with the background music. So I'm going to say variable BG music. And I'm just declaring a variable to hold the sound data. And then I'm going to preload that in my preload function. So I'm going to say BG music equals load sound. And then I'm just going to use the path to where the sound is over here in my sound files. So I rename this BG underscore music.mp3. And in P5, I have to interact with the canvas or the page in some way in order to play sound. I can't automatically play a sound. So I'm just going to tie the background music to a key press. So I'm going to put that on the spacebar. So I'll say function key pressed, and then I'll check to make sure it's the spacebar. So I'll say if key code equals 32. That's the key code for spacebar. And I'm going to say bg music dot play. And in second, we're going to modify this so that we can play and pause, but let's just test it now. So I'm going to run my scene, and then I have to focus the canvas. So I'm going to click on the canvas and then hit the space bar. Okay, so we hear the sound playing, so that's good. But I want to be able to control the sound. So I'm going to also be able to, I'm going to use this as a toggle. And so I can use some pretty simple logic to do that. So let's move down a little bit. And so here, you can see that logic. Essentially, I'm just going to check to see if the music is playing. And if it is playing, then I'm going to stop the music. And if it's not playing, I'm going to pause the music, or sorry, play the music. And so um, you can also pause if you prefer. We'll look at the difference with both of those. So instead of just playing the music right away, I'm first going to check if bg music dot is playing. And this is going to be true or false if the music is playing or not. And so if it is playing, I want to stop the music. So I'm going to say bg music dot stop. And then I'm going to put an else here. And so the else is the play condition. So when I first load the page, the music will not be playing. So when I hit the spacebar key here, it's going to say, is the music playing? That's not going to be the case. So we're going to go to the else block, and then our music will play. So now I should be able to stop and start the music. So I'm going to run this sketch again. So we hear the music, and I hit the spacebar again, and it stops. So the thing that you can do is also use bg music dot pause, and this will do kind of what it sounds like. Instead of starting the music over from the beginning, it'll just pause the music. So when we start it again, it'll be in the same place. So let's visualize the music as well. We talked about this last time, but let's just review. So if I want to change the design based on what sounds are playing, I can say if bg music dot is playing. Notice this is the same uh, thing I used in my logic. So it's the same logic that I used up here, but I'm using it for a different purpose. Instead of deciding whether to pause or play the music, I'm using this to decide whether or not to change the background color. So if the music is playing, I'll change the background color to maybe a light blue. So we can see the canvas change to light blue. And then when I hit the spacebar again, it pauses and the canvas goes back to its default gray. Okay, so those are kind of the basics of playing sound, but we can also change a lot of different qualities of the sound. So a very simple one we can do is we can set the volume of the sound. So let's use the logic here to set the volume. And what I'm going to do here is the volume is something that can change over time. It's not like stopping and starting. It's could be going up or down. So instead of putting my volume change inside my key press, I'm going to put the volume change inside of my draw function. And so that way it'll be updating. And what I'll do is I'll use my mouse as a way to control the volume. There's a lot of different things you could do with this. You could use a slider like we covered a few weeks ago with our uh, document object model lesson. But just for the sake of uh, moving on, I'm going to just use my mouse. So I'm going to create a variable VOL for volume. And I'm going to set this, I'm going to map my mouse. And so I'm going to map the mouse Y position. And since volume, we tend to think of like, volume going up rather than down. I'm going to invert. So if my mouse goes down, I'm going to quiet the sound. And if the mouse goes up, I'll make it louder. So I'm going to go from the top height of the canvas. So actually, height is moving all the way down. So the bottom of the canvas up to 0. So from height up to 0, we'll go from 0 to 1. That's the range of the volume. 0 is silent and 1 is as loud as the original recording. So then I just have to put the volume in the background music sound. So I can say bg music.volume, and then I give it that volume parameter. And let's visualize this as well. So I'm just going to draw a line at mouse 0, mouse Y, to width mouse Y. So this will just draw a little line across our canvas to show us where the mouse is, although it looks like it's not working. So let's see if I have an error. I do have an error. bgmusic.volume is not a function. Let's check. We missed something. So it's not dot volume, it's dot set volume, which makes sense. We're setting the level of the volume. So let's try that again. There we see our volume. And now if I hit the space bar, although I have to click on the canvas first. So there it is all the way at the top loudness. And then I can fade it out. So you can imagine how you would use this, like if you were creating software for people to edit music, they would have faders like this to fade the music or sounds in and out. So volume is one way that we can manipulate our sounds. Let's look at some other ways. There's lots of different things that we can do with the sound, so we're not going to cover every single one, but we'll just cover a few as examples. And then, of course, if you go over to the P5 website, remember that the reference for sound is not actually in the main reference because sound is a separate library. It's in the core libraries, p5.sound. That's where you'll find all of these different parameters. So under sound file, this is everything that we're working with now. You can see these different parameters. There's the stop, there's set volume. We're going to use the pan to change the pan of the sound. That's the next thing we'll do. So let's do that now. So after setting the volume, I'm going to change the pan. So I'm going to say variable pan, and pan refers to the stereo image of the sound. So we always have left and right, or not always, but we typically with music or sound, we have a left and right channel so that we can recreate our sense of positionality in sound. Of course, as people, we have two ears, and that's one of the ways that we can determine depth. We can tell how far away something is because we hear it at different levels in our two ears. And so that gives us a sense of depth and adds to our sense of sound. So we can actually change the pan, whether it's more in the right or more in the left. So for this one, I'm going to use the X since we're going from left to right. So I'm going to say mouse X. I'm going to map mouse X. And now for this range, of course, I'm going to go from 0 to width. That's the range of the canvas. But for the pan, uh, if I want to go, the middle of the stereo image is 0. If I want to go all the way to the left, it's -1. If I want to go all the way to the right, it's 1. So I'll say -1 to 1 as my range, and then I'll say bg music.pan, and I'll put that pan value in there. And then I'm going to draw another line. This one is going to go left and right. So I'll start at 0, or I start at mouse X, wherever the mouse is, 0 for the Y, and then I'll go to mouse X, so the same value on X, and down to the bottom of the canvas, so that's height. So we should be able to hear this now. I'm going to click, and if you're wearing headphones, this should be really obvious. If you are listening to this on computer speakers, you should probably still be able to hear that the sound is moving from the left speaker to the right speaker as I move the mouse across the canvas. So that's cool. So those are kind of simple things. We're just changing the volume and the stereo image of the sound, but we can also change the sound itself. So one last parameter that we'll take a look at is the playback rate, where we can actually speed up or speed down, lower the rate of the sound. So in this example, I'm going to comment out the pan for now. We could bring that back later if we want to. But this time I'm going to use mouse X to change the rate of playback. So I'm going to say variable rate is map mouse X from 0 to width. And this one we want to be careful with, because if we set the rate to below 0 or 0, the sound is not going to play at all, and it's going to create an error on the computer. So we don't want to have 0 as the lowest value. We want something like 0.1. And then on the other end, we can go high, but if we get really high, the sound is going to get really high pitched and it'll be kind of annoying. So I think I'll cut off around like 5. I think that'll be enough to demonstrate. But then I'm going to add a parameter at the end here, true. Remember, this is going to make sure that our values don't go outside of the range that we set for them. So I'm just going to set that last parameter to true. And then I'm going to say bgmusic.rate and give it that rate value. So now I have to hit play. And so now you can hear the rate of playback slowing down. So you can get some really interesting effects that way. And I can speed it up. Uh, the normal rate is probably going to be like around here somewhere. It's kind of interesting. It's like a little bit of a video game sounding effect. So you can get some kind of cool effects that way. So yeah, that's pretty fun. So again, there's a lot more things that you can do with the sound. If you look in the reference, you'll see other stuff that's available. But those are some kind of the fun ones. There's other stuff in here as well. You can add effects. You can add synthesizers and all sorts of different stuff. You can add noise. You can get the user's microphone and do stuff with that. So there's a lot of interesting things that you can do with the sound if you're interested in exploring the sound library a little bit more. So then let's review how we're going to tie these sounds to visuals. So we kind of went over this a little bit with our previous demo, but I'm just going to go over it again. So I have these two sound effects. So let's add those in there. Right now we just have our background music, but we can also play our sound effects. So I'm going to load those in as well. I'm going to say explosion sound and laser sound. And then I'll load those inside of preload. Explosion.wave and laser sound equals load sound laser underscore shoot.wave. And so now I'm just going to tie these to key presses like we did last week. So I'll say if key code, and then if I want to look up my key codes, I can just go to keycode.info. And let's just, for this one, let's use X and Z. So for Z, it's 90, X is 88. So I'll do key code for 88. And I can put a comment here. This is the X key. So I'll say explosion sound.play. And then remember, we have two different states for our sound. So if I want something to play multiple times over itself, I can leave the default sustain. If I want something to play to restart when I play it, I can change it to restart. So for my explosion sound and my laser sound, I'm going to change those to restart. So I'll say explosion dot play, or sorry, explosion sound dot play mode is restart. And then I'll just copy and paste that and do the same thing for my laser sound. And so I'll just copy and paste this as well and change the key number to 90. That'll be Z. And change the sound to my laser sound. And so now I can play my background music, but I can also play a laser and a sound. And I'm going to show you guys a couple of cool things that I can do with this as well to kind of change the effect. So I just have this one sound, but if I want to make it sound different each time I play it, I can use my rate parameter and I could just change it just a little bit. I'm not going to change it a lot. I'm just going to change it a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll say explosion sound. Each time I play it, I'm going to set a slightly different rate. So I'll say explosion sound dot rate. Oops. And then I'll put a random number in here, but I'll make it pretty close to 1 so that doesn't sound way off. So I'll say somewhere between 0.75 and 1.25. Okay, so let's copy that code and paste it down here. Change it to laser sound. So now every time I play it, it's going to be a different rate. So we'll get different effects from the sound. This is a trick that a lot of video games use with their sound effects to give the sense of a little bit more naturalness. So the sound doesn't always sound exactly the same, so it feels more natural. It feels like there's more complex things going on with the sound, but it's really simple just to change the rate instead of loading a million different sounds or doing more complex things with the sound. So that's an easy way to kind of randomize things. If we make this range larger, then we'll hear a larger range of different sounds. So let's do that with the laser. So we get all these different types of sounds just based on one sample. Okay, so we do want to use some visuals. So let's add some visuals. And one last little thing I'm going to show you guys is that we can actually add some animation to our visuals. So let's say we want to have like a circle appear when we shoot the laser. So we're just going to do a simple thing. We're going to say if laser sound dot is playing. Let's just draw a red circle. So we'll say fill is red, and I'll draw a circle, and I'll put it just in the middle of the screen, and I'll make it kind of small to start. Let's say no stroke. Oh, but then I'll have to say stroke 0 up here. Okay, but what if we want something to happen with the sound, like it grows or something changes? Remember, we can do simple animations using variables. So let's make a little variable, and this is the last thing I'll demonstrate. So let's make a variable for our laser size. And we'll set that to 40 to start. And I'm just going to say I'm going to animate the laser. So now, if the laser sound is playing, I can use the laser size, and I can say laser size plus plus. So I'm not even going to really do that much with this variable. I'm just going to do a simple animation. Okay, so one thing is it keeps growing. So we do have to do a little bit to control, but we can see it grows a little bit. So that's kind of cool. So let's set it so that when we play the laser, we change the rate, but we also reset the size. So we'll just say laser size equals 40. That way it's going to reset the size each time. You don't have to do it that way, but it's kind of fun. Let's also set the X to a different position. So let's say variable laser X equals 200, and we can put laser X in here, and then I can set that to something random. I can say laser X equals random 0 to width, and now my laser will show up in random places as I'm playing it. Although the Y is always the same, so I would have to randomize the Y as well. Let's go ahead and just do that real quick, and then we will move on. So we can get some kind of cool effects that go along with the sounds to make it a little bit more interesting in our sketch. Of course, you don't have to do that. It's just one way that you can embellish it. And you could also animate other things. It doesn't have to just be the size or the position. But I just wanted to show a few examples of different things that we could do with this. Okay, so for this assignment, obviously it involves sound. So it's a little bit different than the assignments that we've done previously. So for documentation, that makes it a little bit trickier. But of course, we have most of the time when we look at these projects, we are going to go to the link that's provided. So for this one, we'll stick with the same documentation of just an image and then just link out to the project, and we can go look at the project and hear that. You could record a video where you hear the sound, but the setup for that is going to be kind of different if you're on a PC or a Mac, and it's actually quite challenging on a Mac to record your own video. There is, if you are interested in making, oh wait, yeah, where's the Open Lab page? If you are interested in documenting this project with a video so that you can hear the sound along uh, with the visuals, there's a page on the MMP 210 site where it shows different ways to do screen recording on the Mac and the Windows. And this video here actually shows you how to record your screen using the internal audio as well. So if that's something that you want to do, if you want to do more advanced stuff, OBS is an open source software that allows you to record your computer as well. So not necessary, but if you want to have more thorough documentation and you want to include the sound in your documentation, those are a few things that you could take a look at. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. I'll put a link to this in the voice chat, and I'll go ahead and upload that video. So I'm going to stop the video now.